Today we will start with module 6, which is going to cover smart sensors everywhere, the so-called Internet of Things. In this session, we will define the Internet of Things and what it means, and we will identify the benefits and challenges relative to prior innovations. We will identify ways that companies must prepare for the unique risks when pursuing IoT strategies, and we will describe how IoT is shaping and reshaping competitive advantage. We will also look at some of the challenges that IoT is bringing and how to navigate them. So the Internet of Things is a network of physical devices, vehicles, appliances, and other physical objects that are embedded with sensors, software, and network connectivity, like Wi-Fi. And this allows them to collect and share data. And we may have a collection of smart objects all the way to smart cities. So let me give an example. Sensors are located in many different types of technologies that are in our built environment. So you may think about in our infrastructure or in products, in our environment, and where we live. And the sensors are recording different types of data. So for example, leaks, or flows, or position, and so on, and collecting this data continuously. All of these smart objects are connected either to one another or to some hub, and they're connected through Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or some other type of connection. Those signals are relayed to either straight onto the internet, and that's why, or via satellite or some other type of antenna. It may be on our person if we're walking around with our phone, for example. It may be in our homes. It may be in our cars. It may be in our built environment. And all of these objects are connected. So they are really about connecting people and processes. For example, connecting people in terms of location and tracking, in terms of finances, in terms of security and energy. Basically, every part of our economy is now being connected. All of the processes, all of the products are more and more connected. And this connection is leading to very diverse applications. Some are quite, I guess, simple, like in our homes and monitoring the energy or comfort, in our mobility, so our cars, and as we have seen, the self-driving cars. It might be within our body directly or on us, like a smartwatch, for example, all the way into our cities and connecting buildings to each other and to a centralized connection system. But these interactions between entities and appliances is really starting to create new types of ways of looking at the world, such as smart thermometers or activity trackers, parking sensors. They're really starting to open up different ways of collecting data and seeing the world. But to boil it down in a nutshell, the value of the Internet of Things is captured in three ways. It is either one-to-one, where we have one smart object that is connected to one user, one manufacturer, or another product. We can have one to many, which is the idea where you have one smart object that is continuously or intermittently connected to other devices simultaneously. And we may have many to many, where many smart objects are connected to many other objects to coordinate and optimize the system. The Internet of Things has really been a long time coming. In 1982, Carnegie Mellon University showcased a modified Coke machine, and this machine was connected to the internet, and it was able to report its inventory and status of drink temperature. By the 1990s, the University of Cambridge had a connected coffee pot, and this was quite rudimentary. They basically pointed a webcam at a coffee pot on their building floor, and it allowed people to connect to the webcam to watch whether there was still coffee in the coffee pot. And this was designed so that people would not have to take a pointless trip to the machine. So quite rudimentary at the beginning. But by the 1999, the idea of a smart home was very well developed. So really, the Internet of Things can be described as being developed in at least three waves. The first wave during the 1960s and 1970s saw the development of automated individual tasks, such as ordering, like order processing and bill paying, all the way through computer-aided solutions. And this led to the increase in productivity and a real need for process standardization. The second wave in the 1980s and 1990s saw the rise of inexpensive connectivity to other computers, and this allowed for the coordination of activities across suppliers and channels and a wide servicing of customers across geographies. And the third wave, which is the one we're currently in, started in the 2000s, and it saw the rise of the internet as synonymous with the product itself. So the internet now extends beyond the user and the user accessing the web, and it enables this interaction with the physical world. And this has led to a dramatic performance improvements, greater innovation, productivity, and economic growth than in the prior two waves. What's the big deal? Well, the number of Internet of Things objects that are connected worldwide is dramatically increasing, as you can see from this graph here. Already in 2019, there were more things connected to the internet than there were people on Earth. And as you can see, this is increasing steadily. The other big deal is that this global Internet of Things market is enormous. It was estimated to be $7 trillion in 2020 and expected to grow enormously by 2030, according to the McKinsey Global Institute. So this is a very, very large market. There are some forces that are shaping the Internet of Things sensor adoption. As we have seen throughout the semester, data storage and analytics are maturing. The internet itself and its bandwidth is becoming widely available and will be even more so with the arrival of Starlink and 5G. The cost of sensors has been coming down and is continuing to decrease. And devices are becoming more and more appealing and interwoven with other technologies, making them easily adopted. As we have seen in earlier sessions, the adoption of new technologies is happening faster today than ever. So the Internet of Things is really defining business. Let me kind of show you how. So here's a graph where we have three different types of businesses based on scope and customer value. We have businesses that deal with transactional, contractual, and operational activities. And when these business types are looked through the lens of the Internet of Things, their focus really becomes the following. Transactional businesses can really be thought of as being in the business of innovation. Contractual ones are in the business of efficiency and productivity, whereas businesses that deal with operations are really about agility, responsiveness, and strategy. And when a range of companies are asked in which of their function could the Internet of Things have the greatest impact, most respondents answered service operations or manufacturing, with limited scope for supply chains, research, marketing, and some smaller other functions. But remember, the Internet of Things will have a role to play in each of those sectors too. It's just they may not be recognized as such today. But many times we have seen already in the semester that just because we believe that there is a role for big data to play in leadership or policymaking or whatever it is, it does not mean that it is actually implemented. So when the same companies were asked what the greatest capability gaps for the Internet of Things was related to their enterprise, most answered that the challenge was integrating Internet of Things solutions into their business workflows, followed by the usual problem of managing data. But despite these difficulties in the adoption of the Internet of Things, there is evidence that it is reshaping business competitiveness. In various different surveys, it was found that the Internet of Things is increasing efficiency and reducing cost, as well as improving the visibility of different processes so they can be acted on. It is favorably impacting service operations and favorably impacting manufacturing. And most respondents in those surveys thought that the impact would be very high or transformative. And I think the main message to come out of the idea of the Internet of Things is that if anything can be connected, it will be connected. And I think that's really the core idea of the Internet of Things. So let me give you some examples on how it's reshaping competitiveness. The first one is in data entry, whereas before we had a web-based approach to the internet, where users had to actively engage and choose to opt in or opt out. Now with the Internet of Things, it is passive, and users can forget that they are connecting and actively participating. So the idea that users can opt out is becoming harder and harder. It's also reshaping data monitoring, whereas before data had to be generated by users, dependent on text and images and audio clicks and their veracity. The Internet of Things, as we've seen in one of the sessions, can be collected directly through devices, including in our environment. And this can be slightly more standardized and relevant than data generated by users. It's also reshaping through data sharing. So whereas before sharing was more internal to an organization that collected data, the Internet of Things is allowing data to be shared between providers as well as other devices. And there are basically unlimited ways for connections to be made. It is reshaping how we learn. So in the previous model. Businesses were learning about their customers based on their activities inside the digital world. And the big difference now is that we are learning about ourselves, about customers, from actual habits and preferences in the real world. So you can imagine this could be dramatically different. A customer that can opt in can also tell whatever they believe about their habits and preferences, which may not match with their actual habits and preferences, but that is now being able to be captured by these passive systems where the customers or the person cannot opt out. It is also reshaping decision making. So, whereas before there was a lapse in time um, between what the customer needed and what the solution that could be provided was, now, because everything is so real time, devices can support this idea of a dynamic decision making system and make the connection between the need and the solution gets shorter. So, if we were to summarize, the Internet of Things is really reshaping competitive advantages because it is real time responsiveness, because it is fine grained, because it is a dynamic solution, because it is expediting decision making as well as management. There's really endless opportunities and connections to be made through the Internet of Things. But as you can imagine, these endless connections also bring about interesting challenges. Um, this one is very reminiscent of big data in general, but with this enormous volume of data, there is obviously a lot of difficulty managing and even using the data. So we already saw that there was a lot of struggle to even integrate the Internet of Things into existing workflows. We saw that there's a lot of problems managing the data, but there's also more um, telling complications, like the inability to even identify where Internet of Things would be useful, and being able to gather the value from the connection between devices that may not be interoperable. And just to give an example here of the difficulty of managing this volume of data, in one example, there is an oil rig that has 30,000 sensors, but it produces so much data that only 1% is actually examined. So an enormous amount of data goes untouched, right? And the other challenge that comes out is that at the end of the day, sensors are necessary, but they're really not sufficient, because they really need to evolve with the the capability for digital awareness and leadership. So the ability to use analytics, the ability to comprehend big data, the ability to transform what can be gathered from this data into actual insights that are um, actionable, and having that leadership to even have the vision, the alignment, the decision making in order to use the data wisely and effectively. So having sensors is good, and depending on how we look at it, can be good. Um, and all of this connection does yield new opportunities, but we as humans continue to be the bottleneck rather than the technology, and we need to catch up. So to summarize, the Internet of Things is this network of smart objects that collect and share data. It has emerged in waves of development since the 60s and is continuing to evolve today. It is reshaping competitive advantage by being passive, by being connected to reality in real time, with this increasing difficulty to opt out. IoT is challenging to integrate, the data volume is difficult to manage and use, echoing the problems of big data in general. Sensors are everywhere, but this is only a start, as digital and leadership capabilities must also evolve.